right. Well, you guys, welcome back. If you are new here, we are the Habit team. The Habit is a nutrition coaching company made for women by women. Our program is built for you with coaches who put your goals, lifestyle, and personality first. If you want to learn more about us, head to the episode notes or go to thehabit.com. That's habit with a Y to either request more information or book your free discovery call.
Hello. Welcome back. You got just Coach Zan on the mic today. And today I'm going to be talking about something that almost every person pursuing health, fitness, weight loss, self-improvement, whatever it may be, what they eventually experience. And that is health shaming. And why this topic came to mind was because I was actually at a bachelorette weekend a couple of weekends ago, and I saw it with my very own eyes. But here's the deal. I've been in my fitness journey for 10 plus years, and I'm at a point where I don't care about those remarks. But I single-handedly watched it derail someone else's weekend. And then I thought, it's complete BS. And so let's talk about why this happens and how to ultimately navigate it. And I'll get into my little story a little later on. But honestly, this topic matters because health shaming can come from literally anywhere. It can come from strangers online, from coworkers, from friends. It can even come from family members or your significant others. And sometimes the most confusing part is that it can show up both ways. You can be shamed for not caring about your health enough, right? But then the second you do start caring about your health, suddenly people have opinions about that too. You may hear things like, you're obsessed, you never have fun anymore, you're too strict, you're too rigid, or you've changed. And for a lot of people, this creates this really uncomfortable emotional tug of war where they feel like they can't frickin' win. So today, I want to break down why health shaming actually happens, the psychology behind why people react negatively to change, why your growth can unintentionally trigger others, and most importantly, how to navigate it without becoming bitter, defensive, or even isolated. Because the goal is not to become emotionally hardened. The goal is to learn how to protect your peace while still, staying connected with the people that you love. So let's dive into it. First and foremost, why does health shaming happen? I think it's important to understand that health shaming is rarely just about food, workouts, weight, or body composition. Most of the time, it's about emotion. When someone sees another person making changes, improving habits, setting boundaries, or becoming disciplined, it can unintentionally force them to confront themselves. So it's not a you issue, it's a they issue. And that discomfort often gets projected outwards. So for example, someone starts meal prepping, someone stops binge drinking every weekend, someone starts waking up early, they prioritize their workouts, they start saying no to certain social situations that they didn't before. To the person making those changes, it feels empowering. But to someone else, it may subconsciously feel like, wait, should I be doing that too? And instead of sitting with that discomfort, people often protect themselves psychologically by minimizing, criticizing, or even mocking the person that is doing the changing. That's why you will hear comments like, oh my God, just stop caring. Life's too short. You're taking this way too seriously. One meal won't hurt. You used to be more fun. Because if they can convince themselves that your behavior is extreme, then they don't have to examine their own behavior. And I want to be careful here because this doesn't automatically make people bad or malicious. A lot of this is subconscious. A lot of this people are unaware of how it's triggering them. Humans naturally seek familiarity and sameness within their social groups. And change disrupts those group dynamics, right? So if your friendships were built around drinking every weekend and then suddenly one person changes, it forces the dynamic to shift. And people often resist shifts that make them uncomfortable, simply put. Another reason why health shaming happens is because health and body image are deeply emotional topics. A person's relationship with food, exercise, their self-worth, discipline, their appearance, it's often tied to years and years of experiences that may have involved childhood conditioning, insecurity, trauma, comparison, shame, diet history, self-esteem issues. So conversations about health are rarely neutral. Even simple behaviors can become emotionally charged. So you ordering a salad might feel completely normal to you, but someone else may interpret it as a judgment toward their own choices, even when no judgment really exists in this context. That's why sometimes people react defensively to things you never even said in the first place. So that's the overall general idea behind why health shaming happens. If you yourself are the one making change, you're not doing anything wrong. It's affecting the other person simply because we don't like change. It is uncomfortable within human nature. So let's dive into the difference between health and identity, because I think this is another really important layer here. Sometimes people don't just change their habits, they completely change their identity. And this is where things can become difficult socially. There's a difference between I prioritize my health versus my entire personality is now about my health. Because when health becomes morally charged or superiority driven, relationships can become strained. And to be honest, some people do unintentionally become judgmental when they enter the fitness space. They start labeling foods as good or bad. They criticize others constantly. They act morally superior because they wake up at 5 a.m. and they track their macros. And that energy pushes people away. And there's nuance here, right? Not all criticism you receive means everyone is jealous or insecure. Sometimes it's truly worth asking, am I still connected to people compassionately? Health should ultimately improve your life, not make you emotionally rigid or self-righteous. True health does include flexibility, emotional regulation, social connection, confidence, balance, adaptation, not just physical appearance. So I did want to make this slight remark because some people do set off on a health journey and they do act like they are better than others just because they are prioritizing themselves. And when they look at other people who may not be in the same spot as them, they inevitably, whether it's intentional or not, they become self-righteous and almost like a know-it-all. And that energy is just not always welcome, especially if someone knows they need to be making changes. They're just not ready and they're not in that stage of readiness yet to make those changes. And so everyone's journey is obviously different. And so while you're getting healthier, you still want to make a conscious effort not to push that onto other people who may not be in the same space as you. So I wanted to make that, again, a little segue, but why people ultimately feel threatened by change. So one of the hardest realities about growth is that your evolution can unintentionally challenge the people around you. And again, this doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong, but humans often build relationships around shared behaviors. So when one person changes, it can ultimately create that fear in someone else. Sometimes people will start ruminating and thinking, are we still compatible? Will they judge me now? Are they leaving me behind? Will this relationship change? And honestly, sometimes it does change. I have to be blunt here. Yes, it does. Not every relationship survives personal growth in the exact same form. And that can be very, very painful. But I think one of the healthiest things you can learn in this is that you do not need to shrink your goals to maintain other people's comfort. So hear that again. You do not need to shrink your goals to maintain other people's comfort. So you do not need to sabotage your growth so other people don't feel uncomfortable. At the same time, you also don't need to weaponize your growth against others. Both extremes are unhealthy, and the goal is to find that grounded confidence, quiet confidence. You're not proving, you're not preaching, you're not hiding, you're just living in alignment with your current values. So this is where I want to interject and talk about the experience that I witnessed, on the Bachelorette weekend. So it was just a drive away, and as you probably already guessed, I packed all my foods, all my protein options. I go prepared. I've been doing this for a decade. Now, my best friend for like 20 years, she has been grinding in her current fitness journey and she is newer to it. It's really only the first 1 to 2 years. She's seen amazing progress. And yes, she has created different rules and boundaries for herself. It didn't stop her from going to the bachelorette party. She didn't have anxiety around that or anything. She is still a very social person. But navigating these social situations is something very new to her compared to me. So on Friday, we already knew on the itinerary that we were going to be staying at the Airbnb and making our own pizza. So we were going to have a pizza night, a fun activity between all of us girls. And I knew going into it, okay, I definitely want to set aside some macros for 1 to 2 slices of pizza that I make. But in my mind, I know that is not going to be enough protein for me specifically. So before hitting the road, I bought a Caesar salad with 4 ounces of chicken on top of it. And I told myself, I'm going to eat this first. And then I'm going to have 1 to 2 slices of pizza, depending on how hungry I am. And I'm going to still enjoy the moment. Now, we got to that situation and I pulled out my salad. Everyone's looking. No one made a comment to me. So mind you, no one was even saying anything. Sure, maybe some thoughts were going on in their head. I don't freaking care. But my best friend, she came up to me and she goes, I'm kind of embarrassed to grab my salad. Like, I don't want to feel judged. And I had to stop her right then and there and ultimately give her this pep talk of, it doesn't matter. What you're putting into your body physically does not affect the other person. And at the same time, we're still engaging in the pizza night and having fun and being social. So at the end of the day, if someone makes a remark to you or they feel like they can no longer be your friend because you brought a freaking Caesar salad to a bachelorette party, then that is not the support and the friendship that you need. Now, I'm not saying it went down that way, but looking at my best friend, I'm like, God, I remember when I used to be in that same exact position, worrying about what other people are going to think, about being judged for bringing my own food and wanting to be healthy. And I could see it clearly, what was going through my best friend's head. Ultimately, because I did it alongside her, she ended up being fine. She ate the salad. We got no remarks. But it honestly triggered me. And I was like, wow, this shit still goes on. And a lot of people sacrifice their goals and their health simply because they don't want to be judged. And that is why this topic came to mind and why I think it is so important to learn how to respond in situations like this. So that leads me into, how do we actually navigate this in real life? So first and foremost, we want to stop expecting universal validation. Not everyone is going to understand your goals, simply put. Not everyone will value the discipline the same way that you do. And honestly, if you wait for everybody to approve your lifestyle before committing to it, you'll stay stuck forever. Second lesson in this is learn the difference between concern and projection. Some people genuinely care about you. If someone close to you says, hey, I'm worried, you seem overly restrictive or anxious around food, that may be worth reflecting upon. But if someone repeatedly mocks your goals, pressures you to abandon your habits, or makes passive-aggressive comments every time you make a healthy choice, that's projection. Number 3, stop over-explaining yourself. You do not need a freaking PowerPoint presentation to justify ordering something different at dinner. You don't need to defend your workout routine. You don't need permission to care about your health. A calm response could be, this is what feels good for me right now, and that is enough. And then lastly, you want to maintain flexibility because that is huge. Being rigid often creates unnecessary suffering. Healthy people can adapt. They can enjoy vacations, eat that birthday cake, miss workouts sometimes, go out with friends and have that alcohol because real health is sustainable. And so when you first set off into a journey, we tend to be more rigid. And over time, you will learn, obviously, that balance for you and yourself. And so whatever point you are in your health journey, this is something that needs to be taken into consideration so that you don't lose social situations or friendships along the way. You just have to learn how to respond without emotion, essentially. Because if your healthy lifestyle ultimately destroys your social life, your mental health, relationships, or even your ability to enjoy life, it really may be worth reevaluating your approach. But if you have found that balance and you still engage in those things and you get those passive aggressive remarks, you need to come equipped with responses that don't sound defensive, that don't start an argument, that kind of just shuts the conversation down right then and there. Because ultimately, you're building an identity beyond just your physical appearance. And that is so, so important. You're not just your physique. You're not just your calories or your macros. You're not just your progress photos. If your entire self-worth becomes attached to fitness, then every comment is going to feel deeply personal when ultimately, I would say 8 out of the 10 times, it is projection from that other person. But when your identity is rooted in character, right, in values, relationships, purpose, integrity, criticism loses a lot of power. So comparing myself to my best friend who is newer in her journey, I've gone through all of that. And I have learned the hard way. I have gotten defensive. I have isolated myself and chosen not to be around certain people who've made remarks like that. And even at the very beginning, when I was still learning, I was super rigid. I felt like I couldn't navigate social situations. But with time, that became easier. Then I'm so proud of myself, right? I'm like, oh my God, like I finally learned this balance, this food freedom, and I can still enjoy life. Then you add in the health shaming and you're like, oh my God, I can't frickin' win. I'm doomed if I do, doomed if I don't. But you kind of build that exterior in terms of just being able to brush those comments off. And truly, when you understand that it's more of an insecurity on the other person and less about what you're actually doing, you are able to walk away from that conversation not feeling as bothered as maybe you once were. But I wanted to go over the psychology piece because there is a rationale behind it and there is a bigger picture than what you're doing in that very moment in terms of change and bettering a lifestyle. And when I learned this, it helped me accept those comments. The health shaming, I was able, again, to brush it off more easily because I understood where and why and what it was rooted in. And once I had that understanding, I was able to not isolate myself and avoid situations. I tackled them head on and they became easier and easier. And at a certain point, if you're comfortable with the person, tell them to shut up. You don't want to hear those things. It obviously depends on the person, the situation, but never, never let someone else sacrifice your well-being and your health goals simply because you want to make them comfortable. Because then when you veer off your goals and everything that you've been working on, you're going to feel uncomfortable. So it's not, in this situation, it's choose yourself over the other person. Allow them to be uncomfortable because that is something they need to work on and not something you need to internalize. So at the end of the day, health shaming usually says more about the emotional discomfort than it does your actual choices. Growth makes people uncomfortable sometimes, even good growth, but your job is not to manage everyone else's emotions at the expense of your own well-being. Your job is to pursue health in a way that's sustainable, grounded, compassionate, and aligned with you and your values. Not extreme, not performative, not obsessive, just intentional. And I think the healthiest people are usually the ones who can hold both the discipline and the flexibility, self-improvement and compassion to others, goals and still having those personal interactions and humanity. So if you've been experiencing health shaming lately, I hope this episode helps you feel less alone, but maybe gave you a different perspective on why it happens in the first place and how to ultimately navigate it in the future. So I am going to leave you guys with that. Again, I hope you found it helpful, and we will catch you next time.